Hello and welcome to another edition of Inside the Process. It's Wednesday evening. This is our regular time and the time for me to share with you some of my experiences in music, some of the thoughts I have about making music in a way that I hope is engaging to you. Thank you for those of you who support me. The support link is in the description. Takes you to my website. Poke around, and thank you so much for those of you who do provide support. I had a great time last night, and I rewatched the stream later to take the tunes off and put them in the comments, which I did last night. And I got off pretty hastily, as if to say, okay, see, my friends are more important. Actually, you're all equally as important. But at the moment I was turning off the phone camera, everything was just sort of like converging at me. Hang on, I'll be right there. So, but I know you understand how much I appreciate you out there. Typically on Wednesdays for this stream, I'm in the house by myself and just talking to you, and I hope you get something out of this. So, I realized just a few minutes ago that I didn't put a reminder out on Facebook about the stream being tonight. And with the reminder, I often list the theme, which I'm calling Journey to the Space. Now, those of you who've heard me talk before know that I've used the term the space. And whether I acquired that term from becoming acquainted with Kenny Werner and what he has to say, or whether I used the term before I encountered his term, I'm not sure. I kind of think the latter, but Kenny Werner will definitely get some credit here for things, but that's in a few minutes. So, I believe it was last week, I had mentioned the encounter with a recording, a video of Keith Jarrett playing the Miles Davis tune Solar on YouTube. It was 2006. And many of you heard me say this before. That was one of the epiphanies. There were, of course, several marquee epiphanies I can remember kind of like they were yesterday-ish. And that was one of them. In that, as I described it, I began to understand that music making is a spiritual discipline. And I'm going to bounce off of that and keep going from there, because that was really a defining moment that helped to focus the telescope to be able to eventually see more of what's out there to see. But it's not like that when that happened, when I understood the idea of spiritual discipline or the music coming through you as opposed to coming out of you, that you're drawing out, at least for people of my temperament. There are different ways of doing things, and there's validity in lots of approaches. But this approach, for everyone, needs to be considered, I believe. And for some people, really is where we, because I'm including myself, would need to live exclusively in order to make it work. And that was the big thing that I learned. But it wasn't like that was completely new, because I was having flashes of that pretty much all my life leading up to it. And I forgot to put this on a clipboard. And I don't have my clipboard with me, but I have an alternative clipboard. And that way I can face you where the sound is going to be better. And also the lighting is better on my paper. So the experiences that I had in playing music and that others had playing music with me would include flashes of that depth. Flashes like maybe a few seconds, maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute, maybe 5 minutes, but then gone. And when it happened, everyone knew it happened. Me, of course, because it was happening to me. I couldn't explain why. And people around me is like, that's great, do that again. And then it's gone. Right? And a band leader that I used to work for called it my constipation, that I would get all bottled up. And I came to realize that I was getting bottled up because it happened that I was trying. You know, but that's something I had to really get to after a period of time. But I understood that that was possible. That would happen to me, but it was like I was tripping over it. But I also understood, and this was helpful at the time, it still is helpful, that music making really is, to me, somewhere, I was going to say analogous to, but really more exactly resembling, or just that it is, prayer. And if you're somewhat inclined to acknowledge the idea of prayer, for someone who's serious about prayer, you ask them, what does prayer involve? What's the primary thing about prayer? And if you're more on the periphery of it, you're going to say, well, things you say, things you ask for. But really, it's listening, right? Because prayer is about aligning yourself with, and I'm going to be really general here, just to say, so everybody can, it applies to everyone, aligning yourself with that which is beyond yourself. So I would understand that, and I would understand when I was in that zone, it was a zone of prayer. That will come to help me later too. So let's just see what I wrote that I just summarized. Prayer. Listening and responding, not for sound, but for where I was moved. And then it became a template that I didn't understand at the time for what I was feeling as opposed to what I was thinking. There's the fork in the road. beautiful tune called The Very Thought of You. And the thought just went through my mind. 1 second. I forgot one thing. I'm always forgetting one thing. Often forgetting 12 or 13 things. All of my favorite things. No, that's not true. All right, what kind of zone am I in today? Oh, we'll find out. So, in addition to understanding or having a template of music or music making for me as prayer, it was also understood that I could be thrown off my game by what was going on around me. So I could be influenced by circumstances. And as I would understand it now a little more thoroughly, circumstances that bring my ego into play, or bring anxiety into play, or bring any kind of conceptual thought that shuts down the path, and I'll say it broadly, the spiritual path, or the intuitive path, or the heart path, which is where this comes from. And I remember one particular incident with a fine musician that I work with, that fine musician, whose first name is Dave, could be watching the stream. And Dave and I would joke about this later, because I had told him about it, and it is kind of funny. So it was many, many years ago, playing a restaurant gig, a trio gig, with Dave, the sax player. I don't know why I don't say his name, but this is not pejorative, but you know who you are, and you'll comment in the stream if you're there. And a bass player. And Dave is a virtuoso sax player, and he can play as many notes as you can imagine being played in a short span of time. And of course what that does is that draws you in if you're the least bit lacking in confidence in what you do. And where I used to see that, by the way, this was years ago. I didn't see it when it happened. I think it was after the fact recording, but Oscar Peterson had a television show, and he would have guests on, and those guests were, from what I saw, pianists or organists, but yeah, keyboard guys. And it was so clear to me what was happening. He would do his ridiculous thing, his unique to him, totally beast thing. But then the people who were the guests, who were fine musicians, kind of felt they needed to try to keep up. And they began playing his game rather than theirs, right? And that became a problem. Because you could tell that they were this off. So I think I'm going to reverse the tunes I was going to play here. I'll finish the story, but my notes here says, also understand that I could be thrown off my game even if I didn't understand the game, which was true. And I'm not saying I do now. I don't put a lot of premium on understanding, but I think you know where I'm coming from. Endless Masquerade, and that came to mind when I put this together because of the first line. Are we really happy here with this lonely game we play? There's some broader truth there. And I'll take it no further. So, Dave the sax player. Oh, I'll say his name, Dave Schiff. Hi, Dave. Great player. And he kind of famously will break into these, call them cadences, break into like more notes per square inch than you're ever going to hear. He doesn't do it all the time, but when he does, it's happening, and it can be intimidating. And I realized that, like, okay, he's doing it, I need to do it, and then I'm just meandering all over the place. So I just made a decision, a determination, which I'm not big on, but this one was fun. While he was taking his solo, that I'm going to pull a Count Basie. I am going to wait until I feel like a note is coming, and I'll play the one note. Then I'll wait, and I'll play another note. I didn't really get back then that I was putting my finger on the actual pulse of what needs to happen for me. Right? But I did it, boom, after waiting a while, and of course everybody got it, and there was a lot of laughter. But it actually allowed me to sort of like get back on my feet, because I put off the things about like comparisons or any kind of determination or what I thought I was supposed to sound like, in some ideal sense, anyway. And that introduced another element in this uncovering. And these last 15 years after discovering that Keith Jarrett post in 2006 have been like, peeling the layers off of this and coming to greater understandings about how it works. I told you about the showboat thing in the 90s, where I realized that my purpose was to connect with people, not to please myself, not just for self-fulfillment, but it connects everyone together. And so it's like, how do I do that? And you're like, okay, I think about that person, and I target that. And so this is like years after that, 15 years after that, a continuation with the idea of spiritual discipline, which takes it out of our responsibility, out of our realm, certainly, but out of our responsibility for how someone else is going to receive it, but you make that genuine connection that now somebody else can connect to, and that's what puts you all in one place. So introducing the idea of being patient was important here. And with the things I had as a black backdrop, when I understood spiritual discipline, including patience, that made sense. So this is a tune that, if Dave Schiff hears me play it, he says, yeah, that's our song, Swundermus. I have not found Swundermus in the Faith book. was going to talk about later, and maybe I still should. Well, and that is, you've heard me say this if you follow me, that while I was playing that, I was having the thought. What? But if my brain is free to like start thinking about things, that's actually a signal to me that I've got this expression in the right place. So I'm not tying up my thoughts, which is how also some people surprise or claim they never thought that could happen or haven't seen it before when I'll have a conversation with somebody while I'm playing. Well, if that can happen fluently, that's also a signal to me, that I am in that right spot. So the thought that went through my mind is to clarify that I wasn't saying that I don't necessarily play a lot of notes. What I was saying was that I don't make those determinations, and therefore I wait and then allow myself to just touch the keys somewhere, play a note, and allow that note, allow the context, allow connecting with the environment all around me to determine where I go, if I go. And it's about waiting. And how long do you wait? Often just a little bit longer than you actually did. But of course, if you're waiting and there's any anxiety about waiting, or you're recognizing you're waiting, and this is a broader thing about waiting or being patient about anything, focusing on it really screws it up. It ain't going to happen when you're looking for it. I think quantum physics pretty much explains everything. It's not going to happen when you're looking for it. When you stop looking for it, it's right in front of you very often, isn't it? So, now, we're going back, and if you missed the thing about Keith, I pretty much said it. It was a video with him playing Solar, which is a Miles Davis tune. And one of his encores, I'm sure, for one of his solo concerts. He played it for like 9.5 minutes. And it was just, Keith is capable of playing, as out and experimental or avant-garde as can be played. But he also can play really, really inside too, and it's the more inside things that connect with me. So he was really just kind of masterfully manipulating, those changes and that cycle. Not playing the way I do. I wasn't evaluating like, he doesn't walk his left-hand bass line, so that doesn't matter. He does what he does, but he did it as an open channel, which, when you hear him talk, is what he strives for all the time. Because we strive for it and we don't necessarily get it. So, what I learned from watching that video, the things that dawned on me at that moment, were that he wasn't reaching in. Now, these are symbolic statements. We're not talking about literally in and out. It's like if you talk about, heaven and hell in a literal sense, this is an aside, but just as an example, if that's what you're going to do and you point up for heaven and down for hell, that's symbolic, right? Ultimately. Now, so somebody may be mad at me, so hell is in the center of the earth and heaven is in the sky. I think the point is this and this, right? And the point of me saying, rather than reaching in to himself to pull it out, he was letting go and receiving and letting it come to and through him. Those directional things that I say are ways to illustrate, to visualize this process. And I think you get that. Even if you don't agree with me, give me this little space and I'll keep babbling on here. So, now this ties to something else I said, right? That analysis then, which is thinking about something, about like how is this constructed? Like when I was watching him play Solar, like that could be really subject to detailed analysis. It was perfectly done, right? Even though he wasn't thinking about it. But that analysis is for after the fact. That analysis is not the path in. Now, the analysis can inform your path, certainly, when you're letting go, and you may have more vocabulary, more things to filter through when it comes through you. And so that's incredibly helpful, right? But the analysis itself is not the path. Okay, in this configuration, in this spiritually defined realm, which is counter to how jazz is taught today in a lot of respects. Because you go through it basically doing the math, and I say that tongue-in-cheek. I don't mean to be overly pejorative about it, but this scale over this chord and this thing over that thing, and I think about this passage and this passing thing and this, what do you call it, approach module, or whatever they do, as opposed to allowing it to happen and then looking at it later and saying, now, what was that? Okay? That's really the goal. And if analysis is not a path in, that ties with the idea that we're not making determinations. And this is something that I have a long history of doing. And we all want to do this. It's human nature, right? We all want to, figure out the best scenario, and here's where we want to be, and here's how we're going to get there, and blah, blah, blah. And that's all great. If you do it and then you let go of it. That's the big thing. But if you're tied to the thought process, then you're never going to be in that more meditative, contemplative, intuitive state that allows this to happen. And that state cannot happen when you are focused in your mind. Period. Right? It's not like, the be still and know thing is something that I've, is in front of me all the time. But stillness does not necessarily mean quiet up here. But it does mean that it's a little away from me. And I think that's going to be something I'm going to say later. Yes, so I'm going to not say anything more right now. So, if it's not outside yourself, oh, I got that wrong, I'm sorry. I wrote this not long before I went live, and I wrote it sloppy. It is not outside yourself if you are constructing it within yourself. There's another general principle. Now, those of you who know me know that I'll still threaten to write a book. It may never get done. It's a discipline and a skill set that I don't really have enough of, I think, to do. But if I do write a book, it will be called Everything I Ever Needed to Know in Life I Learned at the Piano. Okay? And my life skills I've learned right here. And this is actually a life skill. It's not outside yourself if you are constructing it within yourself. Okay? It comes through you using the resources that you have. It comes through you. Prayer, listening, being open, surrendering. Good place for a hymn, perhaps. foil my vision. So, if I have had a one-on-one conversation with you about this subject at all, likely I have recommended the book Effortless Mastery by Kenny Warner. And it's a fairly known book. It's been out for a good while, and it's about getting out of your own way, basically. But Effortless Mastery, the book, was not what informed me and brought me to this space or place of the space, right? And there are musicians who would credit that. But I had found my path there through this long and winding road of my life that I've been detailing to you. Speaking of detailing, if you go to my journal and you look at posts from '06, I forget what part of the year, but of course you can go back in the archives, and you can see a series of posts. And hopefully the video link to Keith Jarrett playing Solar is still on one of the posts, and that will tell you kind of where it all begins, if you're interested in how I was seeing it at the time. Right? So Effortless Mastery was not my path, but it was, when I found the book, actually Philip, a friend, loaned me the book. Philip Dutton loaned me Effortless Mastery, and that was my validation right there, because it was all resonating. And then it was kind of like what I said what music theory class was to me in college, because I had been experimenting with that, never having formal training, but since I was a kid, figuring things out. Music theory class was, oh, that's what you call it, class, right? So this is kind of like that too, because I was getting terms, I was getting a second opinion, kind of, another way of looking at the same things. Like for one thing that he would say, you get to the point where you observe yourself doing what you're doing. That was a much better way of saying it than the only way that I could look at it, kind of see it was almost like an out-of-body experience. I don't think technically it is that, I think that would mean something a little different, but that detachment from myself, I didn't know what to call it, I didn't know what to think of it, but there it was. And you read in Effortless Mastery, Kenny appropriately points out that that's the place you need to be. And then when you were detached from what you're doing, you can watch yourself doing it. So that's one of the big takeaways from the book, observing yourself. And of course that takes the pressure off also of turning off your brain, which can be, I'll get there again. Another thing that he says, the idea of practicing includes practicing to the space. And I'll probably continue this with another title, and it may have something to do with the metronome. So if you see next week or sometime soon the word metronome in the title of the stream, it's going to be a continuation of this. The metronome becomes an important part. But you train yourself to recognize and acknowledge the space, which you wait for, you patiently wait for. And then when you feel, and this is the cool thing he says, when you feel yourself falling out of the space, take your finger off the key when you're playing and stop. So that you train yourself like not to fight. Once you're like lose the space and you're fighting through, you're done. And a lot of time when I'm playing, I'm fighting through a mountain of space. I'll be honest with you, last night was entirely that. Having friends over is great, I love it, but it puts a little added pressure on the doing rather than the being, and ideally, where I am positionally, what I am being, not doing, before I need to perform, it's really, really important. And especially first thing in the morning. And that's where this next thing about the metronome and how I practice to the space will come into play. But if I'm putting things out on the table, or I'm cleaning or I'm, running to the store, I'm doing all those things. And then, of course, people coming in and having conversations and all that. I need to learn to manage that. And Wednesday Mondays that I did for 4 years plus. I'm still doing a little bit of as we wind down. I'm like, the guy there who's saying hello to everybody and having all these conversations before and somehow trying to stay in the space. It's a challenge. And last night there were other things that were pressures against it as well. So I was pretty frantic. I was, it took me several tunes to calm down where I could even hear the basic stuff. There's one tune I tried to play. I could name it, but at least at the moment I won't. And I was trying something experimental, and I didn't know the tune really well. I knew it well enough to play it, but then I was blanking on like basics of the ear sound. Where is that sound? Where is that note? And I played the wrong thing. That should never happen, by the way. And when we talk more about improvisation, it's like you don't go for something that is not already there right in front of you. But when you're starting to find, just like you don't say a word without knowing what word you're going to say. But if you unless you want to tell people you're speaking in tongues, right? And so when you find yourself having to work at it, to put effort into it, you are done. And it's like next to impossible when you're playing, and it's just like a state of frustration the whole time. It gets better. And I had some decent moments yesterday, but it wasn't what it could have been. That being in that space is so important. So you practice that. If once you find it and fall out, you stop because you're not acknowledging that non-space is space, kind of. Does that make sense? So back to me saying now, observing yourself takes the pressure off of turning off your brain. Rather, it's a detachment, because this doesn't quiet people. If you notice that I can just kind of like, people say, what happens in your brain when you do that? I tell them, you don't want to know, and you don't want to have to live with it, so be glad you're not me. only had a brain. And if I only had a brain, I would have remembered something that I need right now that's over there on my table. I will be right back. I will keep talking so you know I didn't get lost. And I'm actually going to get another phone that's deactivated but still has all of its apps on it, because I'm going to pull up that metronome. And this is a new tablet, and I don't think that I actually downloaded, as things fall into the piano, a metronome app yet on this tablet. And of course I'm getting all, let me see. No, I haven't. So my brain did work in that regard. And good. This phone is turned on, and this phone has a metronome right here. No, I don't want to download the paid version. I just want to put the metronome on. And I'm going to let the metronome tick. I'm just going to like move around tempo until I feel something. That's fun. That's 75 beats a minute, or 75 ticks a minute. Yeah, I don't know if you've heard me talk about this yet, but beats? You don't say beats. Well, you can say beats. It's really a pulse. I think that's loud enough. All right. So, the last thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to just make one little metronome demonstration. That's probably annoying, isn't it? So let me stop. I will tell you, it is not annoying to me. I might have wanted to lower it a little bit so it was a little underneath. But the idea of the metronome ticking, unless you make yourself think about it and you start counting with it. I mean, sometimes you have to. Sometimes you have to do the math. You know, whether it's rhythmically or harmonically or whatever, you have to do the math. But the math is not where you live to make it happen. The math is a skill that takes you to the point where you can live there, if that makes sense. So you're not putting the metronome on to like start counting with it and stuff. You're putting it on, and I used to say this to students, it's still true, but I would say it a little differently now, that you learn to anticipate where the tick is. But the truth in that is that you're learning to feel where it is. So this helps us set that space for me where I can think apart from it. And in fact, I had a rehearsal earlier today for the Mainstay Monday coming up, that if you live anywhere near Kent County, Maryland, you should come this coming Monday night, whatever the date is. I don't even know what today is, but it's the 2 and 4, the fourth Monday of this month. Meredith Davies Hadaway will be with me. We'll be doing a combination of Celtic harp piano and accompanied poetry. She's quite the accomplished and acclaimed poet, and that's some really cool stuff. And I walk around. I took it out of my pocket. I don't know where I put it, but I figured let's not have it in my pocket while I'm streaming, which is the metronome with the earbuds. And I had it in my ear, and it dawned on me about an hour into rehearsal, as we're playing stuff, that that's still going in my ear. But it's actually extremely helpful, right? And I'll talk more about that. The one thing I'm going to demonstrate now is something I picked up when I did take more focused jazz piano instruction when I was in my 20s with Don Glandon. This is like forever ago. And a typical thing you do if you're a jazz person is you take the metronome, instead of putting on 1 and 3, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, which is more of a classical up and down thing. You backbeat it. You put it on 2 and 4. 1, 2, 3. So it's kind of like, having a drummer in a way. You get that backbeat, that little spot, man. Friends don't let friends clap on 1 and 3, right? So now I'm not going to turn it off. I'm going to leave it kind of loud so you can hear it. as well as me. And I'm just going to play a tune, and this can help with the space too, because if I'm making determinations, I can fall off the metronome because I'm taking energy away from the listening, from the connecting to this thing, right? So this helps me quite a bit. And keeps you from speeding up too, which, yeah, right. Whoa. while I was playing that, I was thinking about, and now I just forgot. Yeah, you can't try to hang on. Oh, I remember. So I back up these streams, as well as the piano with my friends, on another camera, a third phone now, because that's the best quality camera I have at the moment. And I post occasional Escape from Home hours or Piano from My Friends hours on YouTube on my website. But I try to post all of these, but I can use my current experience as an example. I have a 1-hour video for a future Inside the Process. That's gonna be cool, by the way, and I'm gonna probably run that in 2 weeks, and also change the nights from Tuesday to Wednesday, switch piano for my friends inside the process. You'll get a notice of that. But with the high definition, bigger files, it's a 2-day venture so far trying to load a 1-hour video on my lovely rural internet. Still slightly better than satellite. Yeah, so when I use my, inferior camcorder, it was an easier upload because the file was smaller, but it's also an inferior file. So what I've decided to do, so I'm behind in uploading them. The titles are all listed there. I was trying to go from back to front, but now what I'm going to try to do is put them on right away. So like last week is up there. This week's hopefully will get up there by tomorrow if I can figure out how to load it faster. And then I'll try to catch up with the missing weeks in there. So if these interest you, there's one I missed because I forgot to turn the camera on. But if these interest you, they'll be available on YouTube. Many of them are right now. So I think that's enough. I do have a gig with the Madeira Band next Wednesday night. What I'm probably going to do is I'm going to do this live at noon on Wednesday. The next week I have a gig on Tuesday night with George Jazz on Holly Lane. And what I think I'm going to do then is do the first pre-recorded loaded video on Tuesday night, because I can set it to start at a certain time, and then I'll do the piano for my friends on Wednesday night. And the videos, these are cool. I'm going to do a separate announcement about it, but you get a preview here. I'm starting to ask friends who are musicians to share with me about their process and bring that into the bigger discussion about inside the process. So I had this wonderful hour chat out in my new room with Paul Madeira that we video recorded the other day, just talking about how we both got into it and our passion for it, and it's really cool. So that's another dimension we can add to inside the process as we go. So hopefully you're engaged by this. Feel free to comment or even message me privately, and let's stay connected, and I look forward to seeing you one way or the other again soon.